Welcome back to Tide Pod on the YouTube home of Tide Illustrated. Jack Knowlton and Tony Tsoukalis. And Tony, Alabama's done it again on the road in SEC play. Alabama basketball wins against another top 15 team. I have yet to find a stat or do the research myself to check this, but I really want to check what the record is for that amount of wins on the road in SEC play, because I feel like Alabama's got to be charging toward it if they can pick up a couple more big time wins on the road here. But yeah, Road Warrior Tide back at it again. They beat Mississippi State on Wednesday evening, 88-84, taking down the Bulldogs at the Hump. The shortest road trip in the SEC. I've come to learn a lot of people, including myself, until like last year, didn't know that fact. By the way, that's the closest distance between two schools in the SEC. I've broken that news to several people in last week in the build up to this game. But
The more you know. I've known that one for a while, but I've also been
yeah,
covering Alabama for a while. So
it's a good fact. I was new to it like last year, and so I guess I'm putting myself on blast there. But anyway, in the shortest road trip in the SEC, Alabama gets another big road win. This was a super fun game. It was kind of funny because, coming into it, Nate Oates on a Crimson Tide Sports Network interview said, I think this will be a rock fight, probably going to be a lot of fouls called. And it really wasn't. It was a pretty free-flowing game. Every team was above like 1.2 points per possession in the second half. Tons of offense, and it made for a really fun ending. A lot of good shooting as well. It was a super entertaining game.
it felt a little like it was chippy, though. I mean, there weren't necessarily always foul calls, but I feel like if you would have asked Nate Oates after the game, he would have told you maybe that there should have been some foul calls. It seemed like there was still some tough, like there weren't whistles, but there was some tough play, like in the paint. Like
Yeah,
it was a classic kind of Alabama Mississippi State game, just without maybe the stoppages that we thought were going to happen. But I still think it was a physical game, if that makes sense.
yeah, it definitely was not unphysical, and certainly Mississippi State's not going to ever play that way. But Nate Oates talked about it in the lead up to the game. They have a lot more offense than they've had under Chris Jans so far, and they showed it because it was quite the display. But Alabama does get it done, and they got it done from beyond the arc, specifically or mostly through one man, and that's Chris Youngblood, Tony, where we're going to start. Had his second straight start, was in the starting lineup again for LeBaron Philon, and had an excellent game. 23 points, 7 of 10 from three. Kind of drew the ire of Nate Oates. He said actually after the game, he was asked if he thought he had shot 7 from 10 from three in a game before. And he said, humbly, he has. I can prove he actually has not. His best clip before that was 6 for 11, and 23 points is a top 5 scoring performance for him in his 5-year college career. So actually, Chris,
maybe he meant high school. Maybe he meant.
He could have been including the prep, of course, Tuscaloosa native. So maybe those records are somewhere.
Where did he go in Tuscaloosa? Do we know?
Well, he went. I think he ended up going to high school in Georgia, but he grew up in Tuscaloosa. So maybe
okay.
maybe in a middle school game or something, he was just running up the score on some poor T-town middle school. But yeah, he nevertheless had a very good game. 7 of 10 from three, 23 points. Nate Oates saying afterward, he's hoping this is Chris's coming out party because he looked pretty good on both ends of the floor. Pointed out he was also second in Alabama's defensive leverage numbers, so the Tide was very good with him on the floor defensively too, Tony. And back-to-back games, what did you make of Chris Youngblood's performance? His impact, he's been pretty huge for Alabama. Seems like he's finally turned a corner after the long comeback from the ankle injury.
Yeah, I mean, I like what I've seen. I'm not necessarily surprised. This is kind of the Chris Youngblood that Alabama. This is why they got him, right? I think the thing that not just going 7 of 10. I thought he made some big shots. I mean, like I'd have to go back and like find the actual shots and in the situations, but it seemed like there were times where Alabama really needed him to make a shot. You mentioned this being kind of a back and forth game. There were a few of those that like he nailed that were huge momentum, either killers for Mississippi State or builders for Alabama. And so that was big. And, he's kind of got that Marks Sears gene where he'll shoot from the moon sometimes. And you're just like, what are you doing shooting from 5 feet from, beyond the arc? And he still nails it. So, I like what I've seen from him. I think we're going to be getting a lot more of that. We're going to be seeing a lot more of that with Alabama. And it looks like he might be in the starting lineup now. I mean, we'll talk about that. But I think that his veteran presence in that starting lineup is probably a good thing as well. So I think this is just you're seeing Alabama kind of shape into the team that it's going to be down the stretch, and I think Chris Youngblood is going to be a huge part of that.
Yeah, I really like that Nate Oates pointed out to the defensive side because I wrote about that kind of leading up to the game. I asked him about it and just his physicality. He's 6'4", pretty stocky guard, and I think his build kind of provides another reason for him to start and just provides another avenue for him to impact the game because he can guard multiple positions. Nate Oates said he did the best job on Josh Hubbard when they threw him on him late in the second half. Now Josh Hubbard had 38 points in this game.
Yeah.
No one really did that great of a
Nobody did
job,
a good
but
job on Josh Hubbard. So
but I think he did make a point about Chris Youngblood is able to kind of be switchable and could guard multiple positions. So I really like his defensive upside too, on top of the 3-point shooting, which, like you said, is a big reason Alabama got him. He's been north of 40% the last 3 seasons, and not just him on Wednesday, Tony, but the entire team. I mean, Alabama in this game, they shot 15 of 31, 48.4% from three. You're not going to lose very many games if you are shooting that well. And, you now have had, I think back to Kentucky as well, they were 37% in that game. 2 straight road games, you kind of click from beyond the arc. And that's, I think, a huge step with how fast Alabama's been playing all season to finally see that those threes go in at a high volume and a high percentage. I think is a really, really good sign for this offense.
not to say that Alabama didn't deserve this game because they played well and they were obviously the better team, the more talented team, but they stole this game. And you needed to hit threes in this one because how often do you go into a top 15 team, allow that team to shoot 50% from the floor and still come away with a win? Alabama needed to shoot lights out from three. The difference in this game was that Alabama shot 48% from three and State shot 32%. I mean, really, that's a huge difference in this game because State was doing really well. They led 40-24 in points in the paint. I mean, they shot 50%. I mean, if you're playing a team as talented as Mississippi State and you allow them to shoot 50%, you're going to lose that game. But this is a case of the metrics, kind of being on Nate Oates' side, and this is kind of like why they do it, it was this game, the Kentucky game. I think you kind of got to get a little bit of lucky, but you also got to take advantage of your opportunities, and I think they did so in both of those games.
Yeah, I agree. I think the ball movement has been really, really good from this team. It's not sticking too much. Like they had 14 turnovers, and it really didn't feel like they were, overly damning. And still it's probably a number you can cut down even more from that. But I thought the ball flowed pretty well. The offense flowed pretty well. And obviously it leads to open opportunities. And then, Nate Oates continues to harp. And he's, in his assessment, he thought both Youngblood and Sears didn't pass up any of their open looks from three. Of course, he said Aiden Holloway did, which I feel like we've heard pretty much every game. I think in Nate Oates' perfect world, Aiden Holloway shoots 23s a night. But he chipped in, I think, 3 of 7 from three for the game. So, if those guys are taking every open look they get, Alabama can definitely have more games like this. So it's
got Darion
promising.
Reed back too.
Yep. Yeah, Darion Reed.
Not a big factor in this game, but I think that's going to be a big factor moving forward. So it's nice to just see him back on the court as well.
Yeah, very nice to see him back on the court. I mean, it's depth. I mean, you're down to 9 scholarship players without him, given Houston Millett likely, going to be put on that red shirt and not going to come back. So you haven't had him. To have Darion Reed back is going to be big. Yeah, 2 points, 4 boards in this game in 12 minutes. I mean, that, getting him in for 12 minutes against a top 15 team on the road in the first game back from an injury kind of says a lot about his work ethic and talent too. But yeah, that'll be good going forward. But you mentioned at the top with Chris Youngblood kind of going back here, this is the second game in a row he started. LeBaron Philon has come off the bench, and he wasn't too great in the scoring department. Has been in a little bit of a lull there still. Did have 11 points against LSU off the bench, 5, 2 rebounds and 2 assists, only 1 turnover, which I think is a good sign for him guard wise. But he now comes off the bench. You've had Youngblood now back-to-back games, and you have this explosive night from him. Do you think this is the whether there's another alteration elsewhere, regardless of that, do you think Youngblood is now a permanent fixture going forward for Alabama in its starting lineup?
I think he should be. I like having that experience there. I think you could allow LeBaron Philon to kind of see the game more. Even when he comes in, I think just being able to kind of you know, if you with the way Alabama's kind of struggled to start, having that experienced group, I think is probably better to start a game, and then you have that introduction of energy, whether it's Aiden Holloway, whether it's LeBaron Philon. Um, I would move Mo Diabate into the 3 and then have Jaren come off the bench. I think because he could benefit, in my opinion, the same way, where maybe he kind of gets to ease into games, and then he can provide the same defensive boost that he does. I know that Diabate kind of provides that boost, but I mean, I think with the way Alabama's kind of maybe struggled to start games at times, having I think your best 5 right now on the floor is, Marks Sears, Chris Youngblood, Mo Diabate, Grant Nelson, and Cliff Amore. I think that's like, the 5 you pretty much want to go into. The matchup dependent sometimes, but I think that gives you a really good defensive bunch that you have your shooting with Youngblood and Sears. And I like that to start. I think that gives you a lot of, different avenues and it opens up some stuff. But as far as Youngblood's concerned, I think he's kind of proven that he should be in the starting lineup and that it's kind of working. It's one of those things that it's working now too. So you might as well just ride the hot hand. And if it starts to fade later on, maybe you go back to putting Philon in the starting lineup. But right now, I don't see any reason to change it.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of wild to think about. Last night almost felt kind of eye opening. The lack of shooting in that starting 5 is kind of glaring because outside of Sears, I think Philon is a guy who has some potential upside. Grant Nelson, we're going to talk about it. I mean, hit a big 3 late. It has been capable of making shots, but like there's not much shot making in that starting 5 of Mark LeBaron, Grant, Jaren, and Cliff obviously doesn't shoot any threes. So I think you do get a lot more offensive flow with having Chris in there. And then, like I talked about, and like Nate Oates talked about with the defensive stuff, he is very trustworthy defensively. I think he's a little different than Philon because he's a little more versatile, might not rack up steals, whereas Philon, I think, is a little more kind of pesky. And I kind of think that's better off the bench. You bring that in and kind of just let him loose and see what he can impact defensively. And then he's also shown, he can lead a second unit as kind of that lead guard, running point too. And, him and Aiden Holloway, I think, is a really, really scary duo off the bench. I mean, the fact that Alabama can do that in the first place is just insane. But yeah, it's going to be interesting how they evolve the lineup. Part of me has kind of a gut feeling the way Nate Oates talks about some of these 3-guard lineups, the way we've seen them a lot, impact winning. I wonder if maybe the next evolution is you do Youngblood and maybe you put Philon in instead of Jaren Stevenson. You get a little smaller, but you do the 3-guard thing. Because I do like Mo off the bench. It kind of in the same way as what I just said with Philon. I like just chucking him in there and he's just kind of a lightning rod. And I feel like I don't know if maybe the idea is he is that at the start of the game, but I don't know. I sort of love the role Mo is in right now. I
He's
kind of want to
part of the
protect that.
final 5 in my opinion. I think he's like at the end of games, you're seeing Diabate come in and be a part of that final 5. So I mean, that's really the important one. I guess the argument I would have is that just to fix some of the slow starts. I think Mo gives you
certainly
I
doesn't play
don't know.
slow. He certainly wouldn't be slow.
He gives you some more like I don't think, and I'm not trying to just harp on Jaren Stevenson like I have in the past, but I don't think he gives you anything offensively. So I think Mo gives you a little bit offensively, and that could help, especially if you have another shooter in there. I don't really feel like the benefit that you get from Jaren as a 3-point shooter to me is not really worth it anymore in terms of a starter. I just think that, if you're trying to get a better start, I think Mo Diabate would give you more than what Jaren could. And maybe Jaren's shooting could develop more if he kind of could ease into games. Maybe he's, maybe you just try something new to spark Jaren's offensive side. That's why I put in Diabate.
I definitely would not hate at least trying it and seeing what Mo gives you, because if he can be what he has been off the bench in those first, 5-minute in that first 5-minute shift or whatever, and he's grabbing 3 rebounds in that time, and then maybe getting the free throw line, knocking a couple down, Alabama's gonna have a way better start.
And you have him driving with him and Sears driving with Youngblood and Nelson out in the perimeter, to be able to dish for threes. Then you have Cliff. You have different things you can do. And then like it's not even just him. I think you also experiment of like, what if all of a sudden Diabate is able to give you the same kind of production he does coming off the bench, but now Jaren Stevenson's like so much better coming off the bench. You don't know, like maybe Jaren Stevenson's just a better player coming off the bench. I just like to experiment with that just to see.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind tinkering. It's obviously an interesting, the tough thing too is it's obviously a tough time to do. You're halfway through conference play after Saturday. Who knows how much tinkering he wants to do going forward? But he's looking at the leverage numbers and all that stuff. And you make a very good point. In his eyes, the more important thing is who is out there at the end of the game. And clearly, as Saturday showed, or as Wednesday showed, excuse me, he had the right guys out there at the end of the game to win them that game. And Mohamed Diabate was one of those. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see going forward. But I think, overall, Youngblood probably going to stay in. I wouldn't be surprised if that kind of carries from a guard standpoint. We talked about Marks Sears. Wanted to touch on him because obviously it was his first game back since being benched for the second half against LSU. Finished with 17.6 rebounds, 9 assists. He did also have 7 turnovers. Nate Oates did point out after the game he finished 1 point behind Mohamed Diabate in the blue collar department, despite those turnovers. And then I had this quote I wanted to read too. Some of the shots he hit when probably nobody else in the team would be able to generate a bucket that late in the clock, like he was able to, was big. It's kind of a run-on sentence, but all right, Nate. So I was super happy with Mark's effort and performance tonight. Tony, when you watched Marks Sears, there was the turnover things, but what does it say about him where that is not the focus for Nate Oates, and instead it was kind of the effort he gave at the end, and had still put up a decent stat line? I mean, if you're going to get 7 turnovers, at least you have 9 assists to kind of balance that ratio. What did you think of his first game back since the benching?
It's super encouraging. It's not surprising. I knew that this was going to happen. I knew he was going to answer back. Mark's a high character kid. He's not a problem child. This was never a. I part of the reason why I praised the decision to bench him so much is I knew that, and I think Nate Oates obviously knew this as well. Mark was going to handle it. He was, obviously no one's going to be happy. I'm sure he wasn't happy at the time, but I think it's more of a message to the rest of the team. I talked about this on the radio earlier today. I think that Kalen DeBoer should have benched Malachi Moore, not because Malachi Moore needed it, but because the rest of the team needed to see like this is what happens when you do something when you break the standard. And I don't think Marks Sears needed to be benched in the second half. I think he probably could have got the message another way, but benching him in that second half shows the rest of the team, okay, I'm not going to tolerate this from Marks Sears, so I'm definitely not going to tolerate it from anybody else.
Right.
And so I knew Marks Sears would handle it. He did. Now I think it's totally behind Alabama, and I think it's like another moment for Alabama to grow from. And they've had so many of these like growing moments that I think that's super beneficial. Obviously, it's an awkward time, so you don't necessarily root for those moments to happen in a season, but I think they navigated it so well that it's almost like a positive that like. Yeah. Unless it's keeps on happening, we'll see. I just don't. I see them growing from this. I see this being a positive. It is something to monitor. I mean, you don't want this every 3 or 4 games having to go back and punish a star, but it worked out well, and I think you saw with the effort, and they needed that effort against Mississippi State.
Yeah, and I think too, with your point about not having it happen frequently, it's not just the character stuff. It's obviously as a team, you don't want games like Ole Miss or LSU every 3rd game, because look at the last 7 games of the season. They will get trounced if they have any of those.
But also look at, like this upcoming game against Georgia is a perfect trap game, the same way Ole Miss was, where it's like you're just coming off of a big win. You've got 2 road trips coming up, and then you've got the Auburn game,
3 p.m. tip on a Saturday.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's better, I guess, than a 11 o'clock tip, right?
That's true. That's true. They handled their last 11 a.m. or on the road in Kentucky. They just need to play every game on the road. I mean, it is absurd. They love it.
Well, it's not like they're losing too much in Coleman either. I mean,
this is true. I mean, they're not losing overall that much, but yeah, I think I agree. I agree. I think, I mean, Nate pointed it out, 17, 6, and 9. I mean, he's 4 boards and an assist away from a triple double. So, it's impactful. I think he had 3 offensive rebounds too, and I think Nate really liked that effort. I mean, you kind of go look back. I mean, there's the play against LSU where, they get a a rebound, and Marks Sears kind of stays down on the court, kind of trots his way back on defense. And I think it was that kind of hustle that was lacking that, might have triggered some things with the benching and the decision behind that. And then, he comes back and hustles and plays well and makes some winning plays for Alabama. I think it's huge for them going forward. So that was Mark, and hustle plays is a good area to segue to, because we got to talk about the end of this game, because it was a fun ending. And just all sorts of players, Sears included, making kind of winning plays. You talked about Grant Nelson. Really underrated game, I thought, from Grant Nelson. 15 points, 7 rebounds. He had 3 blocks in this game. I'm really excited to go watch this back, because I feel like I can't remember any of them just in my brain. We're recording this on a Thursday, obviously, day after the game. And I feel like I can't remember any of them. And I want to go back and see his impact defensively, but also hit the clutch 3, started 0-4 from 3, hits one with 2:30 to go to tie the game, or to give Alabama an 83-80 lead. Quintessential. I tweeted it out. Nate Oates wants everyone to take open shots. Grant called for the ball on the possession. He was standing in the corner. He was ready in his shooting stance, drilled the 3.
I'm not going to lie. When I saw that, when I saw him get that ball, I thought, oh no.
Oh, me too. Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. I said it in the press box sitting up there. I was like, oh, here we go. The catapult, as I like to call Grant Nelson, because of his shooting form. Go watch it. You'll understand. But hits a clutch 3. Clifford Amore, again, I mean, you talk about a continued response after LSU, finished with 6.7 rebounds and 3 stocks, which is just steals and blocks combined. And then at the end, he grabbed that loose ball. I think technically it was a rebound because no one had corralled it and lost it, but it was a loose ball, kicked it over to Sears, who made a layup, put Alabama up 3. And then, of course, there's the end of the game where Alabama has kind of that blown coverage. They're down, or they're up 1. Mississippi State would take the lead, and he contests that layup from behind where other people might have given up on that play.
I guess, is that why he missed it, though? Or is that just like the ultimate choke job? That was a head scratcher.
That is another one that actually I have to, you probably had a much better view on the TV, because I saw it did not go down as a block.
No, he just missed an open layup.
A bunny.
Like, I think he was a little bit like, it's like, it's like if a receiver, knows that the cornerback's there and just drops.
I was going to say, did he hear the footsteps? Maybe that's
he
where
heard footsteps, but that's about all. I'd have to go back and watch it again too, just to make sure. But when I'm watching that one, that was, I mean, I guess good for being there, Cliff, and I don't know if he like shouted something or, whatever he had to do to get it done, but that was a missed opportunity. And who knows? I mean, that totally changed the game. If they take the lead there, I think it totally, I'm not sure Alabama makes a shot and then we're in a different situation. So
yeah, I think the chase down element of it, he didn't give up on the play, and he also didn't foul him, which is always good. Yeah, maybe he heard the footsteps there, but I think Amore deserves just some credit for his overall kind of production. I think he's been really good this last kind of 3 halves of basketball, if you will, against LSU and then against Mississippi State. And then Mohamed Diabate, we talked about it. He won the hard hat, led Alabama with 9 rebounds. That's all normal. But
Diabate leads the team with 7 hard hats?
Yeah, it's I have to go back and look at that. He ranks
10th in terms of minutes per game on the team, if we're counting Latrell, right? So like obviously he's not playing anymore. So but like he ranks 10th and he still leads the team in blue collar points. That's ridiculous. That just shows you like that really Mo Diabate shouldn't win very many hard hats just because he doesn't play enough. I mean, like it is a points-based system. It's not like percentage of points. So the more time on the court, the more opportunity you have to win blue collar points. So the fact that he keeps on winning these awards as a bench player is pretty big.
Yeah. Oh, it's huge. And I mean, he continues to just be, Mohamed Diabate. I mean, Nate Oates said it to your point. He said, he kind of forces us to play him. Like you just have to put him in the game because he impacts winning. And, he ended up missing the free throws, but he got that offensive board after Grant Nelson missed his 2 at the line. That ended up being huge. I mean, at least ticks some kind of seconds off and forces, Mississippi State to foul again, have to go the length of the court to get back on offense. And then Chris Youngblood, I'll throw his name back in the ring too. Finally, they made free throws. He made 2 of them with 10 seconds left. That made it a 3-point game. They were ultimately able to hold on. Grant Nelson split a pair, and they won by 4. So
Free throws were not. I don't think anyone did super well.
I have the bad section. We can talk about free throws as long as we like. But I mean, Tony, there's so many different guys making clutch plays. I mean, it just is. This team loves, I think, to do it on the road. They seem to relish it. And we talk about this kind of turner or corner turning. I think it's huge to see it from so many different characters on this team.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that speaks to the schedule that they had heading into this one, and some of those, even if they were, I mean, they did play at Purdue, and that was, a chance to kind of get used to playing in a hostile environment, even though they lost that one. But even some of the neutral site games that they played, just playing these big opponents, not inside Coleman, I think that's been big, and it got them ready for these moments. Also, Alabama's just really good. Like, let's not forget that.
Of course. Yeah.
This is just a good team. They're going to win on the moon.
Yeah, I think it's sort of like being there. I just get a vibe. Like, it just seems like they kind of love, you see in their body language. LeBaron Philon obviously had the thing after Texas A&M where he was doing the going to sleep. And you just watch them in warmups. I saw it in Rupp. I saw it last night. They're kind of smiling and really loose. And I think, they walk out and they're getting booed, and like, they just their reactions to that, I think, is a sign of a team that just likes to play well on the road. And that's obviously very, very important. And yeah, you make a good point. I mean, it's playing all sorts of different play styles, that's, I think, getting them used to those things. And they're incredibly prepared for the postseason. Okay, we'll get into the bad real quick. Just a couple of quick things. Free throws, very bad, very bad. I mean,
even Marks missed one.
Yes. Well, Chris Youngblood in his post-game presser, when he was asked the 7 of 10 question, he brought that up. He was like, I missed 2 free throws. That was crazy.
Yeah, on one, it wasn't just like he didn't just go one. He missed 2. Like, he had a trip to the line where he did not make a free throw.
Yeah, so I wanted to give free throws who
wasn't? You know the best free throw shooter of the day? Cliff Moore was 2 for 2.
2 for 2. Clifford Moore was perfect.
1 for 1.
Aiden Holloway 1 for 1.
Wasn't that on the 4-point play? That was big.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
He hit the N1-3. 11 for 20, 55% from the free throw line. They almost shot worse from the free throw line than they did from 3-point range on Wednesday.
Yikes. Well, that's it, Jack. They need to start shooting their free throws from the top of the arc.
There you go. Yeah. I don't, maybe something needs to change. The fun rule about free throws is that you don't need to stand in the middle of the line. You can technically stand like off to the side if you want. Maybe they need to try that. I'm not sure what has to happen.
You need to go from beyond the arc. Just
be allowed to shoot a 3 and say it counts as 1. I'm really not sure, but yeah, it's an issue. 55%. I mentioned the 14 turnovers in this game. 7 of them were by Sears. It's a couple of them are just weird. And to me, with Sears, the only one that I really felt could have been really bad was the one he threw out of bounds near the end of the game. That was a pretty sloppy turnover. Every time
they challenged, like,
yes, they reviewed it, and it was very quickly.
That was one of those things from watching on TV. You're like, I think they even said something like about it being gamesmanship, because really, like, there was no chance that was ever touched.
Yeah, I think they would have just reviewed that organically, because they don't have the coaches challenge yet.
I think they were just like, Alabama was like campaigning for it.
They were, yes. Oates heavily lobbying for that.
Part of that was because they wanted a chance to kind of reset the game, because I think everyone knew that they did not touch the ball, or Mississippi State did not touch the ball.
It was pretty apparent on the replay. I don't know. I like, again, if you're going to get 17 points and 9 assists, to me, I think you can live with 7 turnovers. And again, if you cut Sears out, they only had 7 as a team. So I think you can live with that. Some of them are just weird. Like, I don't know what the addiction is with him and a lot of these other guards, where they drive into the paint, jump into the air, and then try and pass it. I like, sometimes
that's not going to work on the road. Somebody needs to tell Mark that, like, there was too many of those times where it's like,
and it was jump balls.
The way the game was being called, I said it was a physical game, and there weren't that many foul calls. Like, you got to realize you're not getting those calls, and you're just putting yourself into a bad situation. You're not going to get the call, and so you're just going to either get a traveling at the turnover, or you're going to get a jump ball. A couple of times it turned into a jump ball.
Yes. Yeah. And you're right, because at home, I vividly remember one where he did the same thing, and he managed to turn around and kicked out a super nice pass. Aiden Holloway had a wide open 3. And I mean, I'm sure that is why he does it, because, when Sears drives, he draws 2 or 3 defenders. There's always a guy open on the kick out when you wait that long to pass, but sometimes it's just risky. But
If you're not going to get I mean, he gets a lot of calls that way too.
yeah,
But if you know you're not going to get the call, then yeah, you got to abort that.
I think
That
you're just
style.
taking the good with the bad there to an extent. And again, if the rest of the team's only going to combine for 7, you can win games that way with how good your offense is. But that was
I'm
the
not
thing. And yeah,
super sold. Like he is going to be the point guard. I'm not saying you don't make him the point guard, but I'm not like Sears is not your purest of point guard either. So I think some of the turnovers you're just gonna have to like deal with. Like he's just not. That is a little bit of a hole in his game. He's not a perfect player, and so he's getting better at being a distributor, but I don't think that's like necessarily his strong suit, like I think that like it is still like I think turnovers are just going to be something that you kind of deal with a little bit in his game. I think he's getting better with it, but you're going to have times like this. I just think that that's part of you work around it, you try to get it better, but I think you're just going to have times like this.
yeah. I mean, the ball's just in his hands a lot. I think 7's going to be a high. I don't think on average it's going to dip, that much higher than what it was last year. But yeah, that was some of them are just kind of weird. And then my only other one was of course Josh Hubbard. I mean, I said it. It was the most obvious take ever, but Josh Hubbard is electric. He's one of my favorite players in the SEC. I very much enjoyed that I got to watch a 38-point game. And yeah, no one could stop him. There was not a good matchup for him. They put Jaren on him to start the game. That was weird. Mark couldn't guard him.
Well, that's worked in the past.
It has. I think Hubbard is one of those guards that is just he is so skilled and he's really, really fast. I don't even like, and I am a Josh Hubbard fan, so maybe this is a too much of a comparison. He's got a little Kemba Walker in him. He's just really shifty. He can create a lot of space. His step back generates a lot of space. He's just a hard guard to defend. He's just really talented.
Do you think, the Jaren Stevenson going back to the Mo Diabate, do you think that's the reason why Jaren's starting more is that you're putting Jaren on a guard and then he can guard better on the perimeter than Mo can? Do you think that's more the reason why you're maybe going with him as a starter? Because you're doing more of that, putting your 3 on a guard
Yeah,
I think that's probably why they are doing it.
I think Nate Oates likes the size.
You're not really going to put Diabate on a guard.
I don't think so. I think he's a little better on just a kind of a traditional player his size. That isn't too fast. But I think Josh Hubbard was just a matchup nightmare for everybody. Yeah. I think it's just very hard to screen him out of games. They let him shoot as many shots as he wants also.
And, I think Darian Reed too would give you another option once he gets fully healthy. In situations like this, where if you wanted to put him on a guard, I think that he gives you another option in that regard.
Yeah, he's good defensively. But yeah, I mean Alabama, to counter what Josh Hubbard was doing scoring, they won the rebounding battle. They did give up the 3 offensive boards in one possession, but if you take those away, they only gave up 10 offensive rebounds, had 17 themselves. That was a big thing Nate Oates was looking them to get better at. So they made up for it, but Josh Hubbard's so much fun. He's just a ridiculous player. And yeah, so that was my only other thing from the bad. So Alabama beating Ole Miss, beating Mississippi State 88-84 in Stark Vegas. They move on now. You mentioned it, Tony, a bit of, the possibility of a trap game. And, again, you're coming off this big road win. How do you build off of it and respond to it is going to be the big question because Alabama's facing Georgia. The Bulldogs 15-6, they're 3-5 in SEC play. That game is 3 p.m. on Saturday on ESPN2. Quick things in the Bulldogs. They're 37th in KenPom. They have the number 76 offense, number 18 defense on the site. Best stat I'll note, Alabama shot the lights out against Mississippi State. If they could do it against Georgia, I'll be very impressed. They rank 5th in the country in opponent three-point percentage. Teams are shooting 28.3 against them this season. They have a lot of length, and they also have Asa Newell, who is a legit draft prospect. He's a freshman, averaging about 15 points and 7 rebounds per game.
They also have a contributor to the all-name team in Blue Kane.
Oh, Blue Kane, yes.
My boy Blue.
Yeah, my boy Blue. Yeah, great shout out there to Blue Kane. What is your take you're feeling heading into Georgia, Tony?
Yeah, it's a trap game, like you said, and the fact that they do guard the three means that Alabama's going to have to come out and play hard because they can't just rely on. Sometimes you can get by just on a good shooting night. They're probably not going to have that against Georgia, so I think that you need to come out hard. You need to come out focused and play that defense. Once again, it's one of those games where I think if Alabama comes out and does what it's supposed to do, it shouldn't be that much of a problem. But Georgia is another team that if you come out slow, they can beat you. I mean, I'm just looking through their schedule. Didn't they had a game where I mean, yeah, they beat Kentucky, albeit at Georgia, but they gave Auburn a game. So this is a team that can really, they can beat you if you don't come out to play. So um, I don't think Alabama's gonna have a problem. I think, but this Alabama team hasn't necessarily been consistent with effort, so that'll be interesting to see. It's just how Alabama comes out. I think you'll know in the first, 5 to 7 minutes how this game's going to look. I'm not saying
Mhm.
that the game's going to be necessarily won or lost in the first 5 minutes, but Alabama could come out and blow the doors off of Georgia, or at least get off to a comfortable start. Or if it's close, I think it could be just one of those games where you have to kind of sweat out for 40 minutes.
Yeah, I mean the recipe's there. I look back at Ole Miss and they had a really good defense. Vanderbilt's got a good defense. LSU can slow some stuff down and muck games up. Georgia's got a good defense. They run teams off the 3-point line. They're all right at generating turnovers. They can do it. Like I mentioned, they have length. They have some pretty good size on that team. So yeah, I think Alabama's got to be at its best again. But yeah, shoot, if it can shoot close to what it did against Mississippi State against Georgia, then I'll be very impressed because that is
You
against
probably
a
won't. Yeah.
probably won't. Statistically, that would not ring true. But yeah, Alabama against Georgia coming up at 3 p.m. on Saturday. We'll obviously cover all of that. We'll have, you know what, Tony, I'm actually going to kick it to you because you and Henry Sklar did some very good work at the Senior Bowl. That's how we're going to end it. Give me a quick summary. What things did you learn? I know you talked to a bunch of teammates, some of the new transfers. You talked to DeBoer. Yeah, give me a quick rundown. What were the key takeaways? And obviously, everyone should also go subscribe to Tide Illustrated. Felt like 15 stories flooding in from the Senior
Yeah,
Bowl.
we
I
had a lot of
loved it.
stories. I think the most interesting stuff is just I like hearing. I don't know if they're ever really going to say anything bad, but I do like hearing stuff from the transfers and hearing about what their teammates say about them. Some interesting tidbits. Henry talked to Kelby Collins, his teammates at Florida. They said that he reminded him of Princely. I can't ever say his name, but
I think it's
Miniman or whatever.
yeah, yeah. Oh shoot, I had it.
A
I
really
had it.
good defensive.
Princely. Yep.
Yeah, like a possible first rounder, maybe early second rounder, went to Old Miss, led Ole Miss in sacks, or so if Kelby Collins can do that on this team, that's exactly what they need. I think that might be very optimistic thinking, but Isaiah Horton's teammates had some good things to say about him. Cam Calhoun's teammate compared him to Deion Sanders.
Wow.
Not that's maybe overplaying things a little bit, but there was obviously a lot of positivity that came from that. It wasn't the best showing from Jalen Milroe. If you wanted to find like a negative, I don't know if any of the quarterbacks were super great, and we'll see how Jalen looks in the game. But it was kind of a like just watching some of the practice. I'll admit I didn't watch a ton of the practice. I'm not really there for the evaluation side of it. I'm usually there for
Tony's
the
not a
interview.
scout. Let's let the
Yeah,
record show.
but just from hearing some of the talk coming out of it and just, watching Jalen a little bit, that's really what I was watching is Jalen. It's hard for me to judge, like what Tim Smith looks like in one-on-one reps or, I'm not a scout. I don't, but it's easier to see from the quarterback position. And Jalen missed on a few throws. He had a good deep ball. And so he had a few good throws. And I know he had like a really like high mile per hour on one of his deep balls. And so it obviously has a strong arm. There's going to be some measurables that really impress NFL scouts, but I wouldn't say it was necessarily a positive week. We'll see how it goes. This will come out on Friday. Obviously, you've got the Senior Bowl on Saturday. We'll see how he does in that game. Probably do really well. Mobile quarterbacks tend to do well in all-star games because there's breakdowns and there's opportunities for them to make plays with their legs. So we'll see how Jalen looks there. But I think it was a positive week for Alabama from the most part, I would say.
What was maybe the major takeaway from talking with Kalen DeBoer? What was the thing that maybe he said, whether it's about the offseason or anything else, just
Kind of left
big
the
thing
door
from
open
him?
for Ryan Grubb, right? I mean, I think maybe if he didn't, it's what he didn't say. I mean,
Mhm.
he didn't say no to that possibility. I think maybe Alabama's waiting on Ryan Grubb, and I don't think that Ryan Grubb's going to be the offensive coordinator this year. But I think the vibe I'm getting from that situation is that Ryan Grubb probably is looking for an NFL job if one does not formulate. Wouldn't be surprised if maybe he was an offensive analyst for Alabama this year, and then maybe he waits it out. And then, you see what you're going to do with Sheridan. Maybe you don't extend Sheridan, you make Grubb your offensive coordinator, or, you just kind of see how it goes. Maybe Sheridan has this great year and you just have Grubb as a analyst and he moves on somewhere. But I wouldn't be super shocked if an NFL job doesn't formulate. I don't think that's Grubb's first choice. And I think the vibe I'm getting is that Kalen DeBoer is like, yeah, well, we have a spot for him somewhere or another if he wants to be a part of this team. But I don't know if that's Grubb's number one choice.
Right. Yeah. So there you go. We'll keep an eye on the Grub front, and obviously, we're coming up in the spring real fast, so it'll be first opportunity to see some of these new transfers, and if indeed Cameron Calhoun is the next Deion Sanders. So stay tuned for that. Subscribe over on Tide Illustrated. You want all that Senior Bowl content? We got it for you. We'll have the coverage of the Georgia game as well, and plenty of recruiting. Got Junior Day on Saturday. Have our big breakdown of that over on the site, and we'll have plenty of follow up there from all the recruits in town for that big weekend. So plenty to subscribe for as we get ready for February already. Countdown to March Madness for Alabama basketball. Georgia game's the halfway point in the SEC calendar, which is just wild. So there you go. So enjoy that game, and we will see you next time.